Good evening. I'm Dr. Greenbrier Almond, and thank you for joining us on our program, Tender Loving Care. Each week on Channel 3, I'm happy to talk about this interface between Christianity and medicine. And tonight I'm excited to use you all as guinea pigs to practice a talk that I'll be giving to doctors over in the Shenandoah Valley later this year who've asked me to come and talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, or how to deal with stress not only in their practice, but also, of course, in the lives of their patients. And doctors, as you may know, are required to keep up continuing medical education hours in order to keep their license, and it's renewed about every 2 years. Most states, like West Virginia, would have 50 hours of training every year. So for me to be asked to come and present maybe 3 to 5 hours of their training so they can keep their license is an honor for me as a doctor to teach other doctors, and I'm happy to do that. I'm going to be talking to them about post-traumatic stress disorder because that's something that I've dealt with the VA and with veterans for a number of years. There'll be a banner across the bottom of this screen while I'm talking tonight, and it's going to be to the National Center for PTSD, and there's additional information that you may find from the VA about what I'm talking about, and of course about stress in general. I think I'm going to talk in terms of the signs and symptoms. What does a doctor observe when he sees someone in his office who may be stressed out? What's going on in our mind as doctors as we check someone out, do our exam, make our observations, and come up with a diagnosis of PTSD? That's going to be better than a laboratory test or an expensive paper and pencil test the veteran or the patient may do. It's something that a doctor can do simply by eyeballing someone. For example, if someone's pregnant, we have a general idea. We may not want to say, oh, are you pregnant? I mean, they might be obese, they might be offended by that. But we generally have an idea, don't we? We observe something, we make an impression, and we can come up with a conclusion. And so there are practical things that we can do. So let's go through the checklist, and then I'll talk more about some of the things that we do in terms of helping people also, depending on our time tonight. One of the first things that happens when someone is stressed out is that they are aware that there's been this one moment in their life when they've been totally overwhelmed. It's a good month for me to be talking to you because the whole idea of overwhelming stress began in West Virginia. You may not remember this, but in 1972, the Buffalo Creek disaster occurred. This was down in Logan County, West Virginia. There was this slag dam of coal refuge that was at the back of the Buffalo Creek. It's a 17-mile long creek. And there were 6 towns along the river, but at the back they had this huge and ever-growing slag pile of refuge. And of course it began to act like a dam, and the water was backing up, and you know how it is this time of the year. You can look outside yourself right now. It's either raining or snowing. So that impoundment was holding more and more water, and the people who lived along the creek said, uh-oh, this is going to rupture. Something bad's going to happen here. We know it. We feel it. And they called Pittston Coal and tried to get their attention, and they kept denying that anything was wrong. But in any event, that fateful day, 1972, that dam ruptured, and that slag pile, sometimes 50 feet high, sometimes 100 feet high, came rumbling down the valley, and people were sleeping. Most of them, this is early morning, they were still in bed. Some people survived. They heard the rumble. Maybe they were already up, but they looked outside the window and realized something was wrong. Still in their pajamas, maybe not even with shoes or socks on. They ran for the hills, and they got up above the ruptured dam as it rushed by, only to see their house and their loved ones, all their possessions destroyed, totally destroyed, and washed downstream. In some other places, people were trapped. They were floated down in houses, and then the houses would hit bridges, which would be acting like a dam, and of course there'd be a horrible explosion and gruesome deaths. And so it was a total disaster. And what happened after that, though, these were normal people, normal West Virginians like you and I. Everyone could see that they had changed. That memory of that event, that overwhelming event, was still with them. Little children, not given to psychological interpretation by any means, but just doctors observing them in their office, cried every time it rained. It's a horrible thing if it rains, you know. And so that could mean another disaster. Well, that's the beginning of PTSD. That's the first thing we're looking for. Is there something traumatic in the memory of someone that is so overwhelming they just can't get it out of there no matter what they do? I mean, some of these people who lived on Buffalo Creek never took their clothes off to sleep at night again, because that was the only thing that saved them. They could get out of the house with their clothes on. Or maybe they never went to work again, never left the house again. They were too afraid that while they're away something bad would happen to their house. You see, it changed their whole life, that traumatic memory. So that's the first thing that we're looking for. The second thing is repeated disturbing dreams of a stressful event. Now, Shakespeare said that in Macbeth, that we have a dream to knit up the raveled sleeve of care. I'm wearing a sweater and a shirt, and not really unraveled today, but if it was unraveled, we would want to ravel it up and want to sew it up and keep it from unraveling more. But when we sleep, we're processing information, stuff that needs to be sorted out and put in proper order. And so our dreams are wonderful times to do that. And we all love our dreams sometimes. I mean, these dreams are what inspires us to climb mountains and to pursue careers. We had a wonderful interview last week with Sarah Gillespie, and she's written a book. She's only 17 years old, but what a wonderful dream, and she has more dreams, you see. So dreams are wonderful things, but sometimes dreams haunt us, especially if they're of disturbing scenes. And if they're too realistic, then we just can't get them out of our mind forever. And I hear this thousands of times, that as veterans would sleep, they would reenact war. And so that the wife could not even sleep by them in many cases, because they would be fighting all night long. They're fighting dreams, fighting wildcats, as we might say in West Virginia. And so dreams are a very part of that. And if someone comes to me and they say, I'm overwhelmed and so forth, then I'm going to ask about dreams. In my own life, and I don't think I've ever had a completely overwhelming moment, but I remember taking tests as a student. You know, all those 12 years in public school, 11 years following that at the university in Wesleyan, and all those tests that I took, I noticed that before at test time, I was dreaming more at night. My sleep was not the fitful sleep that I like, the restful sleep that I like, but it was more fitful, and I was dreaming a lot and having nightmares, sometimes dreaming about the subject that I was supposed to be tested on the next day, maybe history of the United States or something like this, maybe Abraham's Gettysburg Address or something. I was dreaming about that again. But I was sorting up that raveled sleeve of care. A third thing that we would look for as a doctor, and you can do this, you know, self-diagnose your own family on this one, you know, just thinking about these things. Some people have a sudden acting or feeling as if the stressful event was happening all over again, as if they were reliving it. And that's a horrible experience when it happens. For information about this one, and I'm not going to try to use real live examples of patients on a program like this, but I was reading Dear Abby in our local newspaper, and someone a family member had written in and said, my parents have been married for a long time. This is being broadcast maybe on different days, but one of the days is Valentine's Day, and people remember their love of their life on Valentine's Day. And so this lady was saying, my parents have been married for like 60 years. Wonderful marriage, wonderful family. But the father apparently reached over and touched his wife in some sexual manner, and she started crying and screaming and yelling, and she could not be consoled. As it turned out, she was at that moment touched in a way that she'd been touched as a little girl that had shocked her, and it had been suppressed. It was out of her mind, but it came into her mind, and she relived it, and she couldn't stop crying. She was not to be consoled. So some people have flashbacks with their traumatic memory. It's not unusual at all. I was talking to a veteran who lives in a community in West Virginia, and he has an Oriental person who lives across the fence from him. And this is a good neighbor, and they get along, but he stated one day he looked across his fence, and his neighbor is over there, and suddenly his face, the Oriental neighbor's face, is morphing into the enemy, into a gook in Vietnam that he had had to fight hand-to-hand combat with. And it was a horrible experience for him to relive that as if it's happening all over again. And we call that a flashback. And it's not an uncommon experience at all for people to have flashbacks. Sometimes we have feelings very upset when something reminds us of a stressful event. The veterans call these triggers. I mentioned the rainstorm of the little children who lived in Buffalo Creek. When it rains, they cry because it's a trigger for them, remind them of that stressful event. I think back in my life, and this is certainly not a major trauma, but it's how our memory works. I remember a picnic when I was a young boy, and potato salad was served at that picnic. And I ate some potato salad, and I got sick. I don't know if it was bad potato salad or I didn't like the taste, whatever it was. I couldn't stand potato salad until I was an adult. I ate it again later on, and I like it today. But something in my memory said, this is not good. And it was very, very distressing or upsetting to me just to be around potato salad. Now that's a minor example, but I'm just trying to paint a picture here of how our memory works. And by the way, if I'm a doctor listening to someone's story, I'm going to help them sort this out, and I'm going to say, is this a little bit of a problem for you? Is it a sort of a problem for you? Is it a moderate problem for you? Is it quite a bit of a problem for you? Is it an extremely devastating problem for you? Try to get them to put it along a range of how much distress they have. And you can think about this in terms of 5 points or 10 points. We do anger a lot, and we do pain a lot on a 10-point scale. But just to get a picture of how much distress is involved, you can ask people to talk about it that way too. Now some people, of course, have physical reactions too. The heart races, they sweat. It's not uncommon, again, for me to have men who have nightmares of combat who tell me that they have to get up and change their bed clothing in the middle of the night. It's as if they wet the bed. It's a horrible experience for them, but they have to get up and change the bed clothing. They've sweated so much, almost like as if they were fighting the same battle all over again. Many times, people actually develop high blood pressure from stress, and then they get heart disease. And so a lot of our veterans have twice the death rate from heart attack as people who did not go to combat, matched for age and sex and current job and all those things. So it has a wear and tear. Johns Hopkins, probably the best hospital in America, did a study a while back with people who have been through stress, and as they describe their stress, they have a blood pressure cuff on, and their blood pressure goes sky high, like 220 over 120, enough to cause a stroke. And not only that, but the doctor listening, if his blood pressure is being monitored at the same time, if he's really listening with his feelings, with empathy, as we call it, then he will experience high blood pressure also. And at the end of the day, I can at least confess to this, that I feel exhausted at times listening to other people's problems. People will ask me, they say, how do you do it? And I have to unwind with exercise or something else, but I do feel exhausted because our whole heart is involved in that healing process. Sometimes we avoid activities or situations because they remind us of a stressful event. And we avoid talking about these stressful events. It's not uncommon for people, and I see this in my own class in high school. Many of us joined the Army, Marines, so forth, right out of high school, and at that time, 1966, were sent to Vietnam to fight the war there. When we have a class party, we've discovered that we need to hold picnics. People don't want to be closed into a small space. They'd like to be out where they can slip into the shadows if they have to. And as we have a campfire maybe and a picnic, then I see that a lot of my friends who were combat veterans are standing back in the shadows. And they want to be part of what we're doing. They trust us. They trust their friendships of a lifetime. but they're on guard, and they want to be sure that nothing's going to happen to them, and they certainly don't want to talk about this stressful event. They don't want to be put into a situation that would remind them of a situation that they were in combat. We may have trouble remembering certain parts of our stressful event. This actually happened, and this was a number of years ago, so I'm not pinpointing one particular person or a disease. I'm not wanting you to guess who this is or anything like that. But I had a call to come to the emergency room here, and there was a young lady from another town, and she was being brought to our emergency room, and as a psychiatrist, I was being asked to see her, to see what I could do. She had total amnesia for everything. She didn't know she was in West Virginia. She didn't know her name. She didn't have identity on her. It was a real mystery as to what had happened. Now, by training, I knew that something horrible had happened to her someplace, and we had to figure that out. And it took a number of weeks, actually, and we admitted her to St. Joseph's. We didn't worry about payment or insurance or anything like that. We didn't have any of that, but we could feed her and give her protection, and the sisters were very good about that until we sorted things out. We found out that she was actually from California, and indeed she'd had trauma, and somehow she got clear across to America. And she probably will never remember everything that happened to her. But we experience that kind of amnesia when something is totally stressful also. This doesn't happen to everyone, but it's part of, if you start to look at 17 points of things to consider, it's one of those. Sometimes people have a loss of interest in activities they used to enjoy doing. Many West Virginians are hunters. I'm fascinated that we were 5th in deer kill this year here in Upshur County. And we're not the biggest county, we're not the most populated county, but here we were 5th out of 55 counties at the top. We were at the top nearly in our deer kill. Many of us are hunters, and we like to fish, and we like the outdoors. And it's really tragic to me when I hear of a veteran who fought in war. He's probably a good shot, probably in the infantry. He comes back, and no longer can he hunt. It reminds him of killing the enemy, maybe killing some innocent people along the way, and it's just not worth it for him. He just cannot go on with hunting, something that he loved to do prior to combat. Many people who worked in Buffalo Creek after the Buffalo Creek disaster never went back to work again. Certainly didn't go back into the coal business. You see, that traumatic memory changes what they're able to do. We may feel distant or cut off from people. One of the strange things that happened to me, I was talking to this husband and wife one time, and the wife happened to be a nurse and very caring individuals. Love those nurses. They care for their patients, and if they're married to someone, they'll care for their husband or wife too. So anyway, she and he were reporting, and they had apparently been married 5 times. I mean, married and divorced, married, divorced, like that, 5 times. And she said something I've always remembered, that she said, I either got a soft head or a soft heart. And I said, I think you have both, because she couldn't give up on her man, but they definitely, he was cutting her off, and she was trying to get close, and back and forth. But people can get totally cut off from those that they care about. Another tragedy, I always remember this. A man came to me and he said, Doctor, I know something horrible is wrong. My mother just died. We had her funeral. I couldn't even cry at my own mother's funeral. I didn't want to be distant from people. I just couldn't. I couldn't get close to people. And the rest of the story would be that he was in combat, and different times his unit was attacked, and different people that he trusted and loved died. And at least at one point, someplace along the line in his year in Vietnam, he decided, I'm not going to love anyone again. I mean, he might have said it at an unconscious level. Maybe he didn't say it out loud. But in fact, that's what happened. It was hard for him to show relationship, be involved in a relationship again. Maybe again, once again, that person would die or disappoint him. Sometimes we feel like the future will be cut short. In our local paper here just this past week, it was an article that said for the first time in I guess 10 years. This was Professor Rupp talking to us, also an excellent teacher. I'm not in the same class as teaching as he is, but anyway, he's an excellent teacher, and he was teaching us that for the first time in maybe a generation, maybe longer, that people in the United States actually are pessimistic on questionnaires, and they're pessimistic in their lifestyle. So after a while, something changes. We feel like our future will be cut short in some way. You know, and that's a tragedy too, isn't it? Because a lot of times we live up to our dreams. I have no idea why I could dream the dreams I dreamed when I was tiny, but I'm very happy that I did. You know, we were raised up on the hill here in Buchanan, but many times Mom and Dad would have foreign students in our home. And I got to love people from all over the world. And when an opportunity came to meet my wife and get to know her better and then fall in love with her, you know, I was ready to marry someone from the Philippines. And that was fine. That was fine. It was a perfect fit for me. And I thank God for that on this Valentine's Day. But my future, I would say it this way, never felt like it was cut short. I thought that anything I wanted to accomplish could accomplish. The future was open. But how tragic it is to feel pessimistic or have our future cut short. Some people have symptoms, like physical symptoms, again, not wanting to sleep, not being able to sleep, not being able to get to sleep, not being able to stay asleep, waking up too early. And so this is a horrible thing, isn't it? Because if you think about the physiological drive that helps us live, the first thing we have to do is breathe. Well, I've been talking on this program for about 20 minutes. I have been breathing about 12 times a minute. Not thinking about it, but it was happening. I needed to do that. If I think about this past week, I have gone to sleep every night about the same time, woken up about the same time, probably slept about 9 hours, and enjoyed every minute of that sleep. And so that would be an important part of life. It's the second physiological drive for health. But when someone loses that ability to fall asleep or stay asleep, then indeed they're on their way to a lot of illness. And that's part of the syndrome of stress. Feeling irritable or having angry outbursts. This is something that I like about West Virginia. Is generally we're nice. But I have a lot of people who come back from combat, or maybe something bad has happened to them and they're totally stressed out, and now they're irritable and out of sort, you know, and they need to relax and calm down and find their bearings again, get grounded again. And but it's hard to do. I had a man the other day. He had 60 jobs. Remarkable. I've had people have 57 jobs and high numbers like that, but 60 seemed to be one of the higher ones. They were all good jobs, but he would be irritable and he'd quit good jobs. But he's a very talented man. He'd get another good job. Some people are super alert or watchful or always on guard. Not uncommon for people. I joke about this one with people, but they understand and they respond. I'll say, do you have an inside dog? Do you have an outside dog? You know, what? You keep guns around the house. You know, and the patient often will say, doctor, I have one in every room. You know, so anyway, they're always on guard. People have been in tragedy are always on guard. Certainly, the Buffalo Creek people were always watching the clouds, looking for that rain. They're probably always checking the stream to see if it's swollen because they lived through a flood disaster, and they're always on guard. And finally, we can feel jumpy or easily startled. Tragic when this happens, isn't it? That sometimes coworkers will make a loud noise behind someone's back to watch them startle, and they will startle. Because and I've had people refuse to go into stores like Walmart because maybe one time they startled in there. They hit the ground because they thought the enemy was going to shoot or something like this. And they knocked over a shelf, made a commotion, embarrassed themselves, shamed themselves, they feel. But that startle response is very, very big. So we're going to talk about that PTSD clinical checklist. I'm going to let doctors work that through a little bit longer than I am right here in a half-hour program. But also going to talk about safety. How do we guide ourselves to safety? What can we do? We have a few minutes to talk about that too. I have a list here of over 20 items that I find very, very helpful. We'll cover a few of those. One of the most important things to do is to spend time with family or supportive people. the first lesson I learned when I began taking care of PTSD, and I think I saw my first patients as soon as I got to practice, really, about 1974, shortly after the Buffalo Creek disaster. And they wanted to tell the story to people that they loved, what had happened to them. But they wanted it in a supportive environment. And they imagined, and I've heard this now thousands of times, they imagined fishing with their son or daughter and having all the time in the world, and whether the fish is biting or not, it doesn't matter, and telling their story in a peaceful setting like that. So spending time with supportive people is certainly a way back to health. Taking care of one's body is important. At the VA, one of the first things we did was get a gym going, a Nautilus-type gym in the VA. And I see many people out walking. I applaud that. We have these gyms, several of them in town. The college has just added equipment. It's a great way to relieve stress. So taking care of the body is awfully important. Just being able to get along. Sometimes you have to make a decision. I'm going to get along. I'm going to go along to get along. It's a saying we have. And something like that's important. It is an early morning decision. You make it every day. Something may happen. We don't want to do that way, but it's good to get along. I've worked in a number of settings, and each time I go to a new place to work, I say, what are your rules? How do you all do it here? I'm going to go along with your rules. I mean, I don't want to do it the way we did it the last time someplace else. You know, it's not worth it. It's better to go along. Awfully important to relieve stress. Just having structured schedule. Someone is out of work. I see this over and over again in the newspapers and articles. The first thing they suggest is apply for a number of jobs. If you work 8 hours a day, work at getting a new job at 8 hours a day. You know, if you got up at 6 o'clock in the morning, get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Do your exercises, eat your breakfast, have your meditation. Go out and have a structured schedule all day. Even if you're not working for money, work at life that same way. And it's very important to do that. Doctors often do that even into retirement, and we seem to love to work. There's other parts to life. There's play and there's love and there's other parts, but keeping a structured schedule will lessen stress often. People who served in the combat arena and they stayed, for example, in the U.S. Army for 20 years and then get out, often don't develop their PTSD until they're out of the Army. They're retired. The structured schedule of staying in that setting helped them avoid getting PTSD as a syndrome. In fact, we call it a chronic delayed syndrome. And people can structure their life in such a way that it will delay it for a long time. Maybe time for one more. Keeping behavior under control. We need to be nice to one another, don't we? I think we have wonderful examples in Buchanan, but all of us have feelings, you know, about people. We like some people more than we like others, and you know, those are things that we just need to acknowledge in our heart. But each person is important. All of us are children of God. We're made in the image of God. I mean, even if that other person doesn't know they're in the image of God, you know, they're valuable to God. I mean, different ways you can say this to add importance to people. A lot of times when people are our enemy, we demean them. I used the term gook earlier in the program. Gook was what the Vietnamese enemy was called, and it's a sort of a demeaning term. I don't know how it came about, but people have words like that seem demeaning to other people, but we should uplift each other, treat each other with respect. This will help the person who's suffering stress, of course, as well as help the relationships heal. Well, there's much more we can talk about, but I wanted to introduce this tonight because I'm excited that I'll get to talk to doctors over in the Shenandoah Valley here. We're going to be together for about a week, and we're going to do some workshops and talks and work things out because everyone's interested in stress. We live in a highly stressful time. We have a lot of patients who have suffered stress-related disease, and so it's a privilege to be their teacher. Well, until the next time, this is Dr. Greenbrier Aumond thanking you for joining us on our program, Tender, Loving Care. Special thanks to Channel 3 for this opportunity to come your way each week. We'll see you next week.